I have been wanting to talk about this fellow for a while. Get rid of this thing, huh? But yes, you can peg the gun under here, and it looks ridiculous. And I wish that there were other ways to peg the gun in somewhere along here, but there aren't. It's just tab, slot, peg in like that. Look ridiculous. So yeah, I got Velocitron Blurr a fair while ago, as much earlier in 2022, and it's weird because I liked the Studio Series Blur mold, but didn't like the figure because like the coloring and that head was just no thank you. Almost got the Shattered Glass version, decided not to. Saw this and was strangely enamored by it, ended up getting it, and despite a very minor grievance with the vehicle mode, I actually like this figure a lot. So it just kind of, I feel like it goes to show that the Studio Series Blur mold, for all of its faults, for the fact that it was basically a reworking of Titan's Return Blur and also had a terrible, terrible head sculpt, for all of those faults, the mold itself is actually really good. So yeah, Velocitron Blur, IDW Blur, whatever you want to call them. This is a pretty cool vehicle mode. I mean, it is very much just a, retooled version of the Studio Series mold, which itself was a retooled version of the Titan's Return mold, but it gets the job done. And I also think it's cool how, while it doesn't have wheels to roll, the feet work like little platforms that kind of make it look like he's semi-floating. The vehicle I do think looks cool. I actually really like having these wheels that look like they go through the mass here. These obviously are not actual wheels, they're just molded plastic. They don't rotate, but they are painted, so they stand out, which is cool. The thing that kind of bums me out about the vehicle mode is the nose here. It's just so short. It actually is slightly further back than these bits on the ends, and that just kind of makes it look a little bit bizarre to me. I mean, this could be accurate to the vehicle mode from IDW, I don't know, but my own aesthetic interests, I feel like it would be a little bit more appealing to have this nose cone stick out a little bit further, or have these go in a little bit more so that it forms more of a point rather than like a concave thing, or even if you're looking at it like this, like a W. There's also the fact that while he's got multiple colors and tones all over the place, the figure doesn't feel like it's been painted very much. It's actually been painted a lot more than I realized when I first started looking at this thing, really, but it's hard to notice, which is why I kind of hope that they do a repro label set for this guy. I don't really want to get the Studio Series Blur repro labels. I hope they do one specifically for this guy. This bit here is actually painted. The wheels obviously are painted. The light blue bits around the windscreen are painted. These bits back here are painted. These vent bits back here are painted. This is painted, and there's the stuff on the underside that's painted. So there is a fair bit of paint on this guy. It's just hard to notice. But it still looks pretty good for what it is, and I also really like how just sort of Cybertronian and techno-y this looks too, despite having some very clear shared engineering, let's say, with the Titan's Return figure, especially like back here. This looks very Titan's Return Blur. One thing I want to talk about, I did a quick video on this on Instagram, I think, but there were issues people were having with the seat back for Studio Series Blur, and by extension this entire mold. You can see that they actually did a much better job with the seat back. Like, it's much more solid, so it's not as easy to knock down and make it like difficult to get out of there. But I did find an easy way to fish this out if it gets pushed back down, or just during transformation, is to kind of get it started and then turn the like, if you get it out just a little bit, you can turn this, and that bit kind of acts as a wedge and pushes the seat up. Then you can push it up the rest of the way. And there you go. So that's just an easier way to deal with that. But as you saw, it's actually not that easy to get that seat to fall down. So that is much appreciated. Size-wise, Blurr he's a mainline deluxe, so he's about the size of a mainline deluxe. Don't know what else to tell you. And by extension, he's about the same size as, say, Titan's Return Blurr. So yeah, it's just deluxe. He's a mainline deluxe. Alright, now to transform this guy, engineering-wise, it's the same as Studio Series Blurr and very similar to Titan's Return Blurr if you're familiar with that one. But there are some differences that they did with the Studio Series mold that I think are really cool. So first, I'm going to pull these sections off. They peg in up here, here, and a little bit back here. So just kind of get that going. And you also kind of want to tilt it up and back because this hinge will actually sit inside of this bit here. So you can kind of see it just kind of sits in there. So you want to tilt it a little bit so that you can get that fully out of the way. Swing that up and out of the way. Now we can take care of the legs. These obvious robot feet, the heels peg into here. This guy actually is very solidly put together. But yeah, those peg in, so you want to untab them and then open this up and swing that out. Very, very similar to Titan's Return Blurr, as I said. And now this swings down, and these swing out all the way. Split the legs, and this little bit back here swings in. This folds in and clips together. And I like how these bits kind of finish forming the knee there. And then you can flip the feet down and into place. Push the seat in, rotate this around, and now these bits will fold in and peg into the sides. And I actually really like that. I like how that kind of bulks out what becomes the torso. And now these swing up and peg into place. Again, very much like the Titan's Return version. And then these will pull up, and there are these little doors that swing out of the way, but they don't swing very far, and you don't really need them to. But just push that back in, rotate this around, and that'll rotate the fist with it. And then push this up into the forearm, and there's like a little tab here that kind of sits into the forearm there, and that hooks around to hold that in place for the most part. And same thing here, pull it up, rotate it around, bring it in, and then just kind of peg it in there. And lastly, take the cone thing, pull that up, swing it down, and this will also clip into the back. And that's it. So yeah, there is Velocitron Blurr, or IDW Blurr, in his robot mode. And again, this is really cool. I think the mold is really neat. I think the profile that this guy cuts is fantastic too. It's a little bit silly, yes, how he's got a very kind of slender and sleek body, but then his arms are extremely bulky, particularly around the shoulders and biceps, and then these bits hanging off of the forearms. Doesn't bother me at all, but yeah, I don't know. I really like the silhouette on this guy. I really like the color breakup, how it bounces between dark blue, light blue, and kind of like a, I want to say it's like an extremely slightly bluish white, but it could also just be white. It's hard to tell. He kind of looks very monotone because he's just blue everywhere, and possibly white. I feel like a little bit of yellow in a few key places, or orange or something, could really set this off. But who knows? We'll see what happens with the labels. Obviously, you get a little bit of silver, but that's on the sides here, and then the black is around back. So yeah, looking at him from the front, it's pretty much just all blue. Yeah, I don't know. I just think this guy is really cool. It's a really neat silhouette, fun transformation. I like how it is the Titan's Return figure, it's the Titan's Return transformation with some changes. And I really appreciate those changes, like these bits that both help to solidify the arms in place and also tuck in to bulk out the torso. I like the way they did the feet this time around, so they're not just flaps that flip down, they're actual like feet that give you ankle tilts and some forward motion. It's actually on like a faux ratchet. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on here. And he has a lot of really nifty detail. I mean, a lot of this stuff could be seen in the vehicle mode, except it was on the underside. But it still reveals a fair bit, and I like how it kind of comes together. Monotoneness aside, he looks really cool. Now, the head sculpt is so much better than the Studio series. I don't know, I really like this head sculpt. It's kind of silly, but like that's Blurr. I love the ridiculousness, and I think this is more owing to the IDW design, but I love how he both still has his little head thingy, but also he has these like wings on the side of his head. But it works. It's way less bothersome than the Studio Series head sculpt. The face looks pretty nice. I like they gave him a goofy little smile, like he's a little bit cocky almost. Now, articulation-wise, the head is on a ball joint, but it's the ball joint is sticking off of the neck and going into the torso rather than the ball joint going up into the head. So that severely limits the articulation possibilities. You can look up a little bit and down a little bit and get like practically non-existent tilt. But it can rotate. The arms can go all the way around and can go out a fair bit. I also like this bit, how they worked the little thruster things into the design where the arm kind of goes up and around them. I don't know, I just think that's cool how that's jointed. You get a bicep swivel, you get an elbow bend that is 90 degrees. You technically do get wrist swivels, but they only rotate in one direction, like it's banging into stuff if I go this way. So you can pretty much only rotate that way, and you have to disconnect this bit from the forearm in order to do it. So wrist swivels are technically there. You do get a waist swivel. The legs can go forward to about 90 and back to about 90 and out to just under 90. You get a thigh swivel that is inside the hip, which is a nice clean look, and it actually gives you a fair bit of twist, so that's nice. And the knees can go to 90. And then, as mentioned before, the feet, because of the transformation, can angle forward quite a bit, and you do get ankle tilts. So this guy's pretty decently posable, like more posable than the Titan's Return version, and he looks really cool. I keep saying that, I don't know, I just really, really like this figure, which is weird because I have no real regard for Blurr. I just think the design looks cool, and I think the transformation's really neat. And he does have his gun, which is fine. I'm not a fan of how it works in vehicle mode. I really wish it could store somewhere else, even if it was just to like peg into a shoulder or something, but oh well. And here in robot mode, I guess you could try and peg it back here, but then it would look like he has a stinger, and it would get in the way of the waist and the legs. So just plug it into his fist, and now he's holding a gun. He also does come with the, what is it, like a little, he does come with like a little welding thing, and I do not like that accessory, so it's sitting in storage with all the other accessories that I don't really care for. Sorry if anyone wanted to see that. But yeah, as I've said, I actually quite like this iteration of Blurr. He's not huge, but I think he's, average deluxe height, so respectable enough. Actually, no, as I'm looking at him, technically, yes, the little crest on top of his head is adding a fraction of an inch to everything, but I feel like if we're going to the top of the head, he's not that much shorter than Rotorstorm, so it's actually a pretty decent height for a mainline deluxe. And he just has kind of a nice shelf presence. Yes, he is, as I said, a little bit, I don't want to say that he's too blue. He's just, there's not enough contrast between the blues, Like, actually, bringing in a version of the Titan's Return Blurr mold. This is kind of what I was talking about in terms of the blues, specifically the tones involved. I do think they look good, but I think one of the things that makes Legends Blur stand out so much is there's a better contrast between the blue tones. I feel like if the contrast was bumped up here, with the darker blues being darker, or the lighter blues being lighter, or both, I feel like that would also help to make this guy pop a little bit more. But really, if that's my primary complaint with Velocitron Blur, I feel like that's pretty okay. If the only thing I can really gripe about with this guy is that the blues are a little bit too similar in tone, I think that's overall a win. And this figure is overall a win. As I've already said a couple of times, I actually do really, really like the engineering and design of Studio Series Blur. I just didn't like the overall look of the figure. And this completely fixes that problem for me, because I think the figure looks awesome and it's got the really cool design and engineering of Studio Series Blur. I may do some painting myself, or I may hold out for repro labels. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But for now, that is enough about what I think. What do you all think of Velocitron Blur or the Studio Series Blur mold in general? Whatever your thoughts, feel free to chime in down below. I always enjoy hearing from you all. Thank you everybody for watching, and remember, toys are definitely awesome. We all love toys. But at the end of the day, they are just toys.